Hi everyone, and welcome to Kevin and Julie's Personal Well-Being and Financial Health channel. And today I will be addressing with you a very important topic of bad debt. First of all, I will be explaining to you what bad debt is and how one can accumulate bad debt and what it means to you and the long-term repercussions that you may have. Second of all, I will be explaining the tips and tricks on how to pay your bad debt down as quickly as possible to get rid of that. And lastly, I will be talking about, I mentioned bad debt. There must be good debt, right? So I will be showing to you what that means later in the video. First of all, we live in a very instant gratification world where we're bombarded with publicity. We're always invited to spend, purchase a new car, go to the restaurant, go to McDonald's, and then we also have our friends and family that always encourages us to spend as well because, you have your friend's wedding coming up and you want to look good, so you're purchasing a dress or you're part of the wedding party. Well, especially in today's world with everything going on right now, we really need to be mindful of not exceeding our revenues and to ensure that we're not incurring bad debt as a consequence of that. So I created a video of budgeting that I put the link in the description below for you to consult, where I explain where you have to be mindful of your revenues that you generate each month and all the spendings that you incur in the same month, and make sure that you do not exceed that revenue and you live below your means. So I'm inviting you to look at that video, and then this is kind of a sequel to that in a way, explaining to you what it means if you do exceed your revenues. So once you take a look at that and you exceed your revenues for the month, every purchase that you make thereafter, it needs to be paid by someone. It needs to be compensated otherwise. And this is where bad debt comes in play. Because, see, you have credit cards and you have other forms of debt that you can borrow from to make that purchase. And what it means with that is that if you go into the store and you buy shoes for $100, for example, well, you're going to charge it against your credit card because you don't have any money left to make your purchase for you, and in exchange of that, they will want to be rewarded with what they call interest. And usually credit card companies are charging about 10 to 20% of interest per year, which means that if you borrow this money and you don't repay it back within a year, they will want to have $10 to $20 of interest to compensate for borrowing you that money and not having access to it themselves. So then you go purchase $100 worth of shoes and then you don't pay it for a year. Well, at the end of the year, it's $120 instead, which doesn't seem like a big deal in small scale, but when you add it up to a lot of different purchases all together, well, then the amount racks up pretty quickly. And I will show you an example of that right now. All right, so here's the example with the shoes I was talking about earlier. So you went to the store, you bought shoes for $100, and you're putting it against your credit card, yielding 20% interest. So for borrowing you that money, they want 20% more in return. So say that you didn't pay any of that balance in year one, you're gonna have to pay $120, so $20 extra to the credit card company, and then by year two, it's not going to be 140, it's going to be 144 because of what we call compound interest. So see, borrowing shoes, now it's not $100, it came up to $144, and that's just one simple expense. Now, the idea behind compound interest is the fact that they're charging interest on interest. So what it means is, when you're having an unpaid balance on your credit card and you have interest charged against that, they will start charging you interest for the unpaid interest in year one. So you're not paying interest on $100, you're paying on interest on 120. So it'll be a $24 extra instead of 20 for year two, which adds up to 144 instead. And the reality is credit cards really compound not in a yearly schedule, it's on a monthly basis instead, which means that they're resetting all the interest that you're not paying every single month. So in reality, what they do is that they take the 20% and they divide it by 12 months, and it gives an average of 1.66% per month. And when you break it all down, instead of paying $20 of interest in year one, you'll eventually pay 21.84 instead. And by year two, your shoes are not really 144, it's in reality 148 and 45 cents by year 2 because of the notion of compound interest, which is resetting the payment on the charging interest on interest. So this is a very subtle nuance to credit card billing that you may or may not know. And sure, shoes, $100 doesn't seem that bad to pay $44 extra, or 48 actually. But when you add all the other expenses together, or bigger bills, bigger expenses, it can add up pretty quickly. So let's take a second example and just show you really what it does to you. This second example will really illustrate the power of interest against higher debts, such as renovating a kitchen at $40,000 for this example, or it'll do the same thing when you add up all your debts in credit cards that might have a total of $40,000 combined. We'll use the same credit card format here at 20% monthly compound interest, as I explained earlier. And in 1 month, you already pay $664 of interest off of that kitchen renovation. After a year, you're already at $48,737. And if all of that remains unpaid in 4 years' time, you end up with a whopping $88,158.67. That's more than double your kitchen renovation right there in just 4 years. That's crazy. So, I don't know about you, but if you thought $40,000 was a good investment for your kitchen and you thought it was worthwhile, well, maybe you don't think the same now that you charged it against a credit card and it's more than double that. And I decided to go with the same example, but using a 10% credit card, still compounded monthly, and in 1 year, well, it's still 44,000, and after 4 years, it's almost $60,000. So almost 50% your kitchen renovation, almost $20,000 more. So maybe 40,000 was a good idea, but on credit cards, it can really add up quickly. So be very mindful when you use debt for these kinds of purchases and pay that off as quick as you can. Now that I've shown you a couple of examples that really highlights the power of interest and how it works against you when you borrow money from a lender such as a credit card company, well, no matter the amount of debt that you have right now, at least I have good news. It's only a matter of time, consistency, and discipline before you pay all of your debts right off completely in full. And I have a few suggestions that I can share with you to be able to do that and obtain your goal even quicker. My first suggestion is to talk to your lender or credit card company to negotiate with them a lower interest percentage. It's only in your interest to lower that percentage so it's less costly for you. And for them, it's only in their interest to work with you to be able to make sure that you can meet your obligations towards them. So it's a win-win situation and it doesn't cost anything to ask. Secondly, what I would do is lay out all of your debts and your credit cards and figure out which one is yielding the highest interest first. Is it the credit card at 20% or the line of credit at 10%? Because it really makes a difference on which one you're going to attack first. And tackle the highest one, tackle the 20% credit card or the highest one that you have, and then work your way towards the next one, the next highest one, which is maybe 10% with the line of credit, and maybe tackle the next one, which is maybe 5%, and so on and so forth. And this way you will effectively pay your debts quicker, lower your interest, and then you'll be done. But keep in mind though, to always make the minimum payments on the other debts as well as you're paying off the first one because you want to maintain that high credit score, right? Now, if you're the type of person that is really motivated by seeing things done and you like to see progression and that really drives you, what I suggest also is to do something a little different than the previous strategy, and it is instead looking at the balances of your debt. So look at the lowest balance that you have and pay off that debt even though it's not the highest interest one. And then move on to the second smallest one and so on and so forth. And then at least every time you pay off a credit card or a debt, you can check it off and say, okay, I'm done paying that, and at least you see that you're going somewhere and you're moving forward. And that's what we call the snowball effect. So keep the ball rolling. It's not as effective as the previous strategy, but at least if it keeps you motivated, so be it. It's better that way. Another thing you can do is reach out to companies that consolidate or amalgamate all of your debt together. So whether it's credit cards or a line of credit, they put it all together and you only have one payment to do at a fixed interest rate. It's usually lower than credit cards. So it's good in a way because you don't have lots of different debts to take care of. You don't forget any debts. It's maybe less stressful for you because you only have one payment to take care of. However, the only downside to that is that they usually tack your mortgage against your consolidated debt. And usually the mortgage is way less interest than your credit card. It will be maybe 3 to 5% depending on where you are, whereas your credit card is 20%. And when you consolidate it all together, they may charge you maybe 5 to 8 to 10%. So because your mortgage is usually a very big number, a very big form of debt, well, maybe in the long run you're paying more than you think. So just keep that in mind when you talk to them. So I'm just throwing it out there as another idea. Now that I've showed you all the tricks on how to pay off your debt completely, well, what do I mean by good debt? Well, when you use your debts to invest, this can be maybe good for you. Here's an example. You borrow money from a lender that yields maybe a 2 or 3% interest, but you invest it somewhere else that generates 8%. And what you do is you net the difference and you keep 5% for yourself. And that's what investors usually do. When they're lacking funds to invest somewhere, they want to seize that opportunity, so they borrow money from a lender to invest right away. And a classic example of that is real estate. What they do is they borrow money to have a mortgage, they purchase a house, and then they use that tenant's rental to supplement all the payments they need to do and the extra as a cash flow to keep for themselves. And then they also gain value off of the home appreciation as well. So maybe they borrowed about 3% from the bank as a mortgage, but they're yielding 10% or more off of the investment of real estate. And this is what I'm personally doing with Julie, is that we have two rental properties, and we're really doing just that. And borrowing money in that purpose is what we call leveraging. And I can explain that to you in a later video on how you can do that. So stay tuned. So what Julie and myself do is that we borrow money to leverage it towards investments, but we don't carry any bad debt at all. So sure, I use my credit card all the time to take advantage of all the rewards points, but I pay my balance in full and I never carry any balance in the subsequent month. So I pay 0 in interest every single month. So hopefully all of this has been very informative and useful for you, and I hope that the tricks I provided to you today will help you chip away at your debt quicker. And if you have good form of debt or you're looking into investments, look into maybe borrowing money without overextending yourself and borrowing too much, and perhaps invest. Maybe it's a good time for you, but consult with a good financial advisor before doing so if you're unsure, obviously. And if you enjoyed this video, it would mean a lot for us if you would like this video and comment below. It would be very interesting for me to hear you out and have a dialogue with you. And please subscribe to our channel. It will help our growth immensely. And with that said, you guys, from our living room to yours, I wish you a good night. Thank you.